Okay, so this is an instrument called a multimeter, and this one is a digital multimeter, so it is going to read us out a number on the screen. And we use these when we study electrical circuits because they measure a lot of things that you want to know about a circuit. So if you look here,
Yep.
so right now it's off, but then depending on where I put the knob, we can measure voltage, we can measure current, which is measured in amps, or here milliamps. We can measure resistance, which is measured in ohms. And these are the three that we are actually going to end up using on this multimeter. These other two measure things on batteries that we won't use. So the first thing we're going to do is measure the resistance. I have a pile of resistors here, and the multimeter has two different probes on it. So you want to make sure that the caps are off the probes so that you can have the metal ends touching either side of a resistor. And then on the dial, you want to put it toward the one that measures resistance. So for us, we're going to point it toward the ohm. And right now it's reading 0 because I'm not measuring any resistor. But when I pull one of them out and I touch the probe to either end, it's going to give us a number. Okay, so this resistor has a resistance of 2.173 and then kilo ohms. And let me see if I can. Okay, so there's our 2.17 kilo ohms. And so the way that we know it's a kilo ohm and not an ohm or a mega ohm is by looking down in the corner. And the multimeter actually tells us K and then the symbol ohms, so we know it's a kilo ohm. Alright, so we want to check to make sure our battery is not dead. I have two 1.5 volt batteries in this battery pack, and they are connected in series, so the voltage of the whole thing should come out to be 3, 1.5 plus 1.5. So I want to measure that with the multimeter to see if the batteries actually do have that voltage. I was measuring resistance, so I had it pointed toward the ohm, but now we're going to measure voltage, so I'm going to point it toward the V here. And then same as with the resistor, you're going to touch the metal ends of the probes to either end of our battery pack here. And it doesn't matter if you touch the black to the black wire and the red to the red wire. You can touch either to either end. And so I'm going to pick that up. Okay, so we got a voltage of 3.239 volts. The V is down there in the corner, so we know it's just plain volts. And that was about what we were expecting. We were expecting 3, so that's correct. There is a negative sign right there, and that just has to do with the fact of that I switched the lead. So if I touch it the other direction, I should get a 3. So that's just telling me the direction of the current there. Same number, except now I have the positive because I switched the place of the wires. So now I'm going to build just a really simple circuit. I'm going to connect the battery across the resistor. So we'll use some alligator clips to go ahead and connect these wires to each other. So I'm just connecting one wire to one end of the resistor. And the other wire to the other end of the battery. So right now I have a complete electric circuit. Current is flowing from the battery through this wire into the resistor, then it crosses over the resistor and flows back to the other terminal of the battery. So what I want to do is I want to measure the voltage across the resistor and also the current that's going through the resistor. And you can measure both of these with the multimeter, but you measure them in two different ways. So we'll start out with voltage. I already have my knob pointed toward the V, so I know that this is set up to measure voltage right now. And then I'm going to take my leads and touch them to either side of the resistor. And you can touch the leads either to the wires on either side of the resistor, or you can touch them to the alligator clips themselves. And you see I'm reading a voltage of 3.182 volts. And like we discussed earlier, if I switch the sides of the leads, then I'm just going to get a negative number, but the number itself is the same, and that's what is important here. Measuring current is a little bit more difficult than measuring voltage because you actually have to connect the multimeter into the circuit so that the current goes through the multimeter in addition to going through the wires and through the resistor. So the first thing I'm going to do is change my knob to where it's measuring current. So I'm going to point it to this one that says milliamps or amp, which is the unit of current. And then, because I have to connect it into the circuit, I'm actually going to have to break the circuit. So I'm going to break it right here. So right now I have an open circuit. My current's coming here, but then it doesn't have anywhere to go. So we'll let it go to the multimeter, and then the rest of my multimeter I'm going to connect to the circuit over here. So when I hold this on here, I now have another complete circuit. My current's going from the battery through the wire into the resistor, then it goes through the multimeter, and then back into the wire to go back to the battery. And sure enough, now that it has current going through it, I can read the current reading. So I have 1.45 milliamps, so you can see the milliamp there in the lower right hand corner. And the negative, again, is just because of the way I hooked up the multimeter. So if I were to switch the positions of the leads, I'd have same number, but it would be a positive number.